those?
Yeah, there's.
Well, yeah, but the problem is these are statistics. What was saying about statistics and.
Well, that's why the site is called Ad-hocsessions.
Exactly. Okay, great. But you know, there's translation of messages that the user sees every day and messages that they never ever see. And you know, I would like to just have some kind of it's a hard problem because you have to look at the desktop and say what actually matters. And you know,
They're rated down by module. So
yeah. Okay. So it's good enough to maybe tell. Yeah.
Well, it seems like that should be a pretty coarse-grained qualification as well. The difference between 50% and 90% matters. The difference between 90 and 95 really doesn't, especially since we have a great team of translators.
Right, and I mean, we kind of already do this for DI. We go in and we say, well, these languages have, you know, a translation that's something like 95% of the important messages or whatever, and so then we figure out, well, you know, and then these ones are down 50%. We're not going to try to offer them to the user because they're not going to be usable or something. I think we can do that. Anyway, it's definitely been counted that way, and you can count things that way. And then, so the last one.
Just
yeah.
International addition.
Yeah.
Usually, very often, people seem to care about what Debian strings are internationalized, but doesn't take into consideration the software itself is actually considered.
Oh no, I'm really only interested in the actual software itself. The packaging, there's really very little of it that I think a user would see if they're installing a default desktop. I'm guessing. The important thing is the actual menu items and help text and all that kind of thing. That's what I'm curious about. So yeah, if somebody wants to clarify that on the page, that would be great. So, are you nodding because you're doing it, Ashish?
I'm not even finding it online, so I might be able to.
Okay. You found it?
The page title is at the top. You don't have a slash, but
I will let you see it here. Go ahead. I'm trying to remember the screen message.
yes.
Yeah, I should have it installed.
But if you get to the top of this page,
Well, does it? Sure, right.
so
Yeah, you can just see the
name based on
lines.
it doesn't have a slash.
Yeah, that'd be nice. That's not any bigger though. Okay. So yeah, the other one down here is media size, which is its own can of worms, but I tried to word it just to say, is the CD team happy with media size? Is the live team happy with media size? I don't care what media you pick or what size they are, I just want to know.
Yeah, we're flexible enough. I mean, what we need to be making a decision on isn't just does it fit on the CD, but which particular image size should we be pushing with the default download, for example.
And it might also be, well, we would like to provide a very small CD with a full usable desktop, and it might not be the one that's the default if you just go and get DVD. That would be fine. You know. Yes.
In this context, I think it's important also to consider not just in terms of physical media, but also you know, people who may not have such good internet access, who need to get security updates and maybe do net installs. So we're not just talking about, you know, the physical restriction of a particular media size is almost a proxy for a bunch of other costs that come with larger
It's true, there
download
are
sizes.
other costs to consider. I don't know how we could make that an item. But,
I would be happy if you just mentioned that as, because otherwise you'll get the objection that you shouldn't be considering media size because people don't want to download it or something like that.
Stick it in wiki there.
yeah,
well,
find a word.
may I?
Just say to do and, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, that way.
Obviously, modulo multiple people editing the wiki at once, but to be honest,
Well, this
so
is-
long as the data ends up there, we can deal with conflicts
Exactly,
after.
yes. So, yeah, those are all the things I've been able to come up with at that moment. I came up with all of the beginnings, so maybe that's all the things.
Following up on that
Maybe-
particular one, so it's
Yeah.
slightly more again,
Yeah.
as Joey says, it is entirely feasible for us to have multiple different defaults depending on the architecture, depending
Oh,
on
we already-
whether it's
yeah.
on live or install or the size of the media that we want to push through or whatever, it's possible. I don't necessarily convinced it's always a good idea because it does cause confusion for people down the road.
Yeah.
So it's possible, but let's think about it.
Yeah. I guess actually there is one other thing that I kind of left off that I have been thinking about, which is something that the GNOME team mentioned in their message, which is basically you want to have some kind of a continuity between releases. If you can avoid not changing it, it's maybe a good idea too, if there's no, if it's not a big change anyway, like from 2 to 3, which I don't know it would have mattered if we had stayed with it or not from a continuity perspective. But, there's no point in flip-flopping back and forth between two things, constantly, yes. So maybe that's something to put on there. I can't think of many other topics to put on there, so if somebody has any thoughts.
Also going on, discussion was
another
actually
one.
sorting out the choice of desktop and whatever in tasksel itself.
Yes, so I wanted to
It's
talk about
something-
that if I have time, but
Yeah.
I wanted to get this through this first, Ian.
So I'm going to be really controversial now and say that your list should contain on it support for non-system D.
Okay, well, I think for other architectures, we do need that, at least.
Right, but also non-system D on AMD64,
Okay, well.
for example. This is
the
clearly
default,
something
though.
that
This
a
is
fair
the
few
default.
people want.
This is the default desktop, and the default install already has system D in it, so it's kind of if you want to install non-default, then you're probably picking the desktop anyway, aren't you?
I would echo a related comment there that the default isn't what everybody uses. The default is what people who don't necessarily have the experience or the knowledge to change the default should use.
Just to be clear, this is for people who don't know what the words GNOME, KDE, XFC, LXD, X,
Yeah.
with them, etc. mean.
And that set of folks probably doesn't want to be choosing a non-default
Or
event.
don't care what they mean.
Yeah. We're not removing people's choice.
Okay, thanks, you made your point. But I have a second point, which is post-installation flexibility and configurability, which is something that it seems people do care about. And apparently there are, I don't really run any of these things, but apparently there are people have views on this.
Oh, you mean of the desktop?
Right.
So you're okay, I mean,
how
there's
easy
nothing
is it
here
to
about how
rearrange
well
your
does the
menus
desktop
or
work. Yeah.
rearrange your UI approach?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing here about how configurable is the desktop, how well does it work, how popular is the desktop. These are things that we could put on here, I suppose, but they're awfully soft things to try to get any kind of you can get a gut feeling about them.
Okay, so in that case, what I'm saying is, please don't make this decision based only on measurable criteria.
Okay, well,
Because, that way lies management.
So the problem here is if we just go with a gut feeling, then people are like, well, the task eliminators or Joey is just making up some random choice out of thin air or out of, bad magazine articles or something. And if I go with quantifiable material, I'm obviously leaving out data or leaving out gut feeling data. And
So one possible approach to this, two approaches I would suggest that you might use to deal with this problem is explicitly list non-quantifiable things on your wiki pages, things that will be taken into account but which we don't consider measurable, so we're not asking for a report for, but which I'm considering. Another thing you could do would be to treat this page merely as an input that produces like a acceptable, non-acceptable flag, and then you choose somehow between the remaining set.
If we get a set of more than one items that are acceptable, then I think there should be a decision that's made on some kind of other basis, because,
Okay.
yeah, I don't think this page really says how this data is going to be used. It's just data that I think would be good to have, and I think it's good to get input from as many teams as you can who are related to it, and somebody has to make the final point to us or whatever.
I think the analogy to the architecture requalification process is actually relevant here. We're not necessarily trying to rank and pick the best. We're trying to say, these pass, these don't.
Exactly.
Which ones actually pass?
Yeah, exactly.
We don't have a concept of which architectures are better than others. We just have what's on ftp.debian.org and what isn't.
And although that's actually true, but we certainly have, no processes in place based on AND63 moving faster and ARM being more popular than MIPS and things like that. Yeah.
So, sorry, I'm not like super familiar with the process, but like what are the time frame you are speaking of?
I'm sorry, what are
The time frame we're speaking of.
to make this decision?
Yeah.
Well, we have to do it before the freeze or
Yeah.
we will have to get pushed
Ideally,
into the
we need to be
archive.
making a decision in the next, 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So we can actually get this all implemented before the freeze.
We have to have, documentation, images sorted out, lots
Yeah.
of stuff. So the sooner the better. I'd like to, if I can find the time, start mailing the teams during DevConf and get their feedback. And if you're thinking, if the GNOME project would like to get involved and produce statistics for translation data or something like that,
Yeah.
I guess we could try to do that. I guess I'd rather just let the GNOME team figure it out. Personally, I mean, in Debian.
On the security page, says almost all items are going to be relevant however release. Systemd is
Right.
apart because it's basically does the Debian default desktop match Debian standards.
That's kind of the generic.
And
Yeah.
there's some other items, active of IPv6 IPv6 support, which
Right.
is not relevant.
Right.
That's a good question, yeah. Are there any other factors we should be
I would
tracking?
look more factors and
Point them out by all means.
yeah, I mean, and you can't generalize systemd and say it's something like, does the desktop integrate well with Debian or something? I just wanted something specific because
Yeah.
clearly systemd is one of the main topics now. But if anybody has another idea, please raise your hand and I'll put it up here.
A lot of those would fall under that first category of packaging of, does this have, RC bugs or important bugs, of is this horribly broken?
Right. To some extent.
Who wants to do that?
But some of them are more integration.
To be honest, the first one maybe is not so much as just packaging, but I guess maintenance. In fact, do we have a reasonable set of packaging and maintainers to keep it going?
Right.
As opposed to the technical set, which is further down. Does it work well with X, Y, Z?
Yeah, I think packaging kind of, you want, there has to be a maintainer team where they can't report on it at least. But I think you have to kind of factor in the quality of the team too. But also my feeling is, I know that the XFC team is a small team, but does that really mean that they couldn't be the default desktop just because they're overworked? I think we have lots of small overworked teams in Debian that still manage to produce something.
It's the default.
Yeah.
Without really fully repeating the context, I wonder if we could put heat on desktop developers by including as an official criteria for evaluating them with respect to the privacy.
Well,
I didn't hear that. Can you summarize?
okay, yeah, the idea is, could we make one of the criteria that the desktop respects the user's privacy? So, I know that the GNOME team talked about, or the message that we got from the GNOME folks talked about how they're working to do that, but I don't know any details, and I really don't really know how you can quantify it. It could be it's obviously a goal upstream, so they're doing stuff.
So some examples would be, for example, progressions or sandbox applications for isolating things. Maybe integration with things like or not sending the user's keystroke to some server used or
Right.
like this.
Yeah.
I think if we do that, we should have a privacy section and then basically a checklist. And it'll be disappointingly long, but that's fine. And it'll just be like, within the privacy area, which of these does the desktop actually do or not do? That seems like a pain, but also it seems arguably worth doing.
Or we could just say, are there any open privacy related bugs or something like that?
The problem with that is then you end up at the mercy of the really subjective evaluation of the question of did anybody bother filing a bug about it. If it happens to be true that LXDE woke up one morning and added LXC jailing to every application and removed user agent strings from web browsers and so on, no one would know probably. Certainly no one would file a bug related to it.
Right, okay, sure. Yeah, well, I guess we could put privacy on the table. I'm all for it, I suppose. So,
Personally, I would
we have
advocate,
to figure out how to, yeah.
based on the number of different axes there, from affirmative efforts to improve privacy to just don't have any crazy bugs, I'm wondering if rather than making it a column, a row in the table, if we could just put it under that set of, here's some soft criteria we should consider.
Yeah.
I don't think we have hard quantifiable ways to talk about which desktops are more private than others.
Well, you could sort of make a checklist.
Sure, but that checklist is going to look a lot more like, here are the features this desktop is working on, here are the features that desktop is working on.
Yeah.
It's hard to compare them
Yeah,
side
who
by
defines
side.
the checklist? It's
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, these,
At some point, that checklist starts looking like, looks like GNOME, or looks like KDE, and that doesn't work.
I think you can measure more of that, but it also sounds like it's a whole other problem.
do we have a, I mean, we don't really have a team in Debian who is the privacy team. We have various, what, we could talk to the tour.
We don't now have a privacy team.
Huh?
We don't actually now have a
Well,
privacy.
maybe that's something that we need to do.
We should have one.
Yeah, I mean, if
the
there's
privacy
a,
team could maybe use a little more heat to inspire them to maybe work a little bit faster than things that they keep doing.
Perhaps we have a privacy team and nobody knows who they are.
So I have a question from IRC, from Peter Van Holsten.
oh yeah.
He's asking how about making it easier for the user to choose among these desktops?
So I guess, yeah, if there's not any other things to add here, I do want to get to that better. I hope you can hear me, and I'm sorry if you can't, but like I said, yeah. Let's see, okay, yeah. So yeah, I guess we can go ahead. Does this, before I do that, I just want to know, does this basically make sense to anyone? Is there anyone who this doesn't make sense to, who thinks there's some better way to do it, or that we should just go with GNOME, obviously, and there's no possible way this could, you know,
This
you
is
have
a
any
clearly
value?
useful way of doing it.
Good, good. Russ came up with the idea, it has to be a good idea, right?
Let's not deify us totally, but yeah, this is a clearly sensible way of working. And then, to be honest, if there is anything that any of the various desktop teams think is really important to them and we haven't thought of, then there is scope for them to at least give a summary at the bottom of the page,
Yes.
and we can summarise and work through it later. But we need to have a central place for tracking the data, and that's exactly what this is.
Good,
Go ahead.
yeah.
At the risk of being mildly controversial, is it worth taking a straw poll of the room?
About, choices?
Yeah.
Do we want to turn the camera off? I don't know.
I think it's really useful because what's important is to know everything.
What's that?
I just thought I'd ask the idea.
To be honest, I'll argue strongly, no, this room is self-selecting already. The
Fair
people
enough.
that, you know, I mean, I would personally vote, no, all the desktops are crap, let's have none of them. But I'm a special snowflake, I acknowledge
the camera turns off first.
Yeah. I think the point of having a set of concrete criteria is specifically to avoid it developing into a straw poll.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
We will end up using this as a basis for some kind of subjective decision anyway. But let's at least have the information available to make a sensible decision.
So I'm afraid that what the architecture requalification process is not about choosing one. It's about choosing many which are better.
And
Now the question I have asked myself is, with those questions answered, are we going to be able to choose a desktop?
well, at least we'll be
Except
able
with
to,
what you said.
at least we'll be able to choose from a set of desktops that meets
That's
criteria.
Yes. We will find
Or
out if any of the
maybe
desktops
it
or
was,
people have mentioned are clearly not suitable for some reason that we may not yet be aware of.
So we were able to drop some, but yeah.
Yeah. At least we'll be able to say we know that the desktop that we've chosen
To be honest,
meets these
if
criteria.
if the people on the desktops we haven't yet listed come up and give us the information here, it'll tell us enough information to say, is it worthwhile Joey, me, various other people putting the extra effort in to make sure that there's an extra CD variant for those people and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
This is all useful information before the release, so let's have it, please.
Yeah, definitely. And then regarding trying to help, there are many candidates for people who have so desktop manager may wants to pretend to become a desktop environment, meaning something altogether. Maybe on this page we could have a checklist, something which says to be able to come to this list, you should have what? You should provide a certain amount of features. You should have a file manager, you could have image one, blah, 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 blah.
I would rather just say anything that is commonly accepted as some kind of a desktop environment and that is generally thought to be broadly enough usable to, consider. We should just
It's a
consider.
discussion that we can have problems like this. If somebody does come up and say, hi, I'm advocating the FEWM desktop, and I think we have all of the bits needed, then to be honest, let's talk about it. We'll worry about it when it happens.
Okay. I think so. Okay, so, yeah.
Do you plan on doing this every stable release?
Yeah, that's the idea. I don't know if I plan on it, but I wanted
do
to come up
you
with a
envisage
process.
this kind of
Yes.
process being exclusively
Yes,
stable?
that's why it's got the
So I
gist.
have a comment on that is that if we think that this is something which is mainly for the benefit of people who don't know what a desktop environment is, and every stable release, we come, you see where I'm going, right?
Yeah,
we come
yeah.
to a different decision.
Yeah,
This could be
I
quite a
touched on
disturbing
that
thing
earlier.
for someone who buys a
I touched
laptop
on that
every
earlier that we might want to have an item saying, is it similar in use to the previous
Yeah.
desktop environment?
It could be something which is worth explicitly considering.
Yes, I think
How
so.
is the transition between the previous one and this one
Good. So let's,
quite a disturbing one or not?
yeah.
I'm going to add a consistency.
Yes, consistency. You're going to add it. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So I think we're about done with this page. Let me then talk about desktop choice and tasksel, or rant about it maybe, I don't know. So currently tasksel, when it comes up in the installer, has 10 items in the menu, which is a not coincidental number because it's the maximum number of items in the menu that I'm comfortable with having, just because it can get a little overwhelming to be confronted with 20 or 100 or 200 or 1,000 choices when you're installing Debian for the first time.
We used to drop people into deselect at the end, and that's scared
Yeah,
lots of people.
right. I've actually been considering removing some of the items from it that aren't very often used. And now that we have tasksel data, we can actually say, well, this many people choose a file server, which is actually a surprisingly large number of people if you look at it. But we actually can know which ones are, popular.
You talked about having more tasks being, maybe you
Right.
want to say a few words about it?
Sorry?
Maybe you can say a few words
Yes,
about it.
that's where I'm going. So what I do feel comfortable about is having some kind of an escape hatch to say, give me more. So the problem is that implementing that in the constraints of DI is kind of annoying because you're using debconf and the current menu item is a multi-select list. So I wouldn't mind having a more at the bottom of it. I'd be great if it were a button, but unfortunately, debconf can't currently do custom buttons. So it would have to be a menu item saying more. You pick that, and then you're plopped into another screen that has probably all the main desktop environments listed here, and also blends and whatever. Which in that list could be 10 or 20 items. I don't know. I don't really care, except I don't want it to be more than. If it's 100, we're doing something very wrong. Let's put it that way. But there are some technical problems with that because the user may have selected desktop environment first, or they may not have, and this is going to influence what's selected in the second list. And also, we're close to a release, and we have to get all this translated. And I suppose the design of tasksel isn't really done with this in mind, so I don't know how to do it.
So
Yeah.
maybe not for Jesse, but after Jesse, a more flexible tasksel thing would be really nice.
Anytime somebody wants to work
Well,
on it,
of course.
nice.
It's probably late, as I'm saying, it's too late for Jesse. If
Yeah.
somebody wants to work on it, that would be an awesome thing to
There's been bug reports open for 13 years saying, please
Yeah.
add a collapsible hierarchy of stuff. And I'm like, well, we don't have a widget, and maybe we do now in DI, in debconf, but, yeah.
There's a completely separate discussion for a different BOF about whether DI should perhaps use debconf as a backing store for, and not a UI.
Right, even to yeah. But yeah, I mean, this more thing, it seems like it could be done, the time frame that we have, if somebody wants to do it, I don't know if I want to do it or not. I haven't hacked on tasksel much lately.
It's probably something we should do as well, is actually go through the existing set of tasks, as you say, we want to, it's probably worth slowing down.
Yeah.
And then definitely also, I mean, these are things we should be reviewing regularly, but we never get round to them until we're coming to release, is work on what's in those tasks. You know, the file server task for a very long time has included Apple talking stuff, and frankly, let's please kill it. Back on.
Yeah, if you look at the number of changes in tasksel over the past, well, since January, it's been 2 changes, which is pretty absurd, really.
That seems worth asking explicitly. If someone wanted to come help figure out what should be in task desktop or task something else, where would be the please volunteer here point?
Okay, so tasksel is maintained by the deputy boot team, sort of, though it's not really part of, you know, it's kind of odd, because it's a little thing.
It's on the deputy boot because the deputy boot people were the people who seem to care about it most when we find it.
And, you know, we get a lot of bug reports saying change this or change that, and it's kind of more problem figuring out if the bug report actually makes sense, and then, you know, that way. So if you're interested in, you know, doing what's in the past, that's always a good thing. And all it takes is, you know, clear explanations of why the change is happening, I guess, and we can do that. So, yeah. If somebody wants to hack on the more button, the more item, you know, it's just Perl code. It can't be that hard, except that, like I said, it has a few wrinkles.
Now, a fall through of adding more options in tasksel is right down to the bottom of this list again with media. I've seen discussion from the various blends people saying, yeah, we want to all get into so everyone gets it easily.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, they all get in. That doesn't mean they're all on the
Exactly.
media image. So it might be, you can pick OpenStack, you can pick Debian Science, but it's going to go download a lot of stuff from the network. I don't think this is a big deal for any of those use cases. Maybe in other use cases, you'll want to have a separate CD and you can say, well, that's
so one of the things that we've done for a long time is, and it's typically the thing that takes a lot of our effort as we approach a release, is trying to make sure that the things that tasksel wants, the things that are pulled in by the core tasks, all fit on the first CD, the first DVD, however you want to do, whatever you want to target. If we do start adding a lot more potentially way out there packages, which the blends people are very keen on, but maybe not everybody else in the whole distro wants. You know, the concept of a first CD is dead.
Yeah,
the concept of a first DVD.
I think we need metadata for you to look
exactly.
at and know if it's in the more items list, so sure, just ignore it. That seems to make sense.
We do have the concept of, I can't remember, is it essential tasks and non-essential tasks.
Right.
So, for example, when we come to checking sizes and things, or we will make sure that we put all of the essentials of a particular task on first, and then we fall back to essentially recommend later. This is a very hard thing to do depending on the people who put together the metadata in the first place. Is they have all the information to say, well, actually this might be recommend, but without all of this data, you may as well not bother with the first set. Whereas for other people, very much the recommends or suggests are frankly just sugar that really makes things look prettier, but we don't care about in terms of making an install CD work.
Right. And the definition, at least for what goes in a task, is that the recommend should all be installed. Sort of. It is kind of not as clear as it could be, for sure.
Exactly, and making it all fit recursively through the packaging metadata.
That's
damn hard.
Okay. I think we're pretty much out of time here. I'm glad that this makes sense to people.
Maybe just one. Do you plan to? Some architecture may not support the selected primary default desktop. Are there some other criteria for choosing the second best choice?
Oh, you're saying for other architectures?
Yeah.
Well, I think the K3BSD already used XFCE, as I recall. Is that right, Steve? I think they did.
Yes, there was a lot of discussion on this. I've slept since enough.
Well, I mean, I
details.
think that was already the case in the previous release, and
Yeah.
I think to some extent it's really up to the, the port at that point. Although we'll obviously have this information, they can say, well, if we support two different things, then we know which one they kind of prefer we go with, and we'll talk it over and see what we come up with.
It's entirely feasible for the default set of install media to have a different desktop architecture. It's possible. I don't necessarily like the idea, because then we end up with our release notes and our documentation that people look at, then changes depending on what you're wanting to do, or which architecture you're using. That's hard. We just need to make sure that we make it clear to people what's happening when they pick things.
Because when you say that, can we think maybe we should try to have a consistent second page first choice.
Yeah. So.
I have another question, comment from Peter. He asked if there should be an option to install hardware-specific packages depending on what hardware is connected to the machine. Like if you have a TV card, install a TV application or whatever.
See, this seems to me where we're getting into, don't want to put it in tasksel, although I guess you could say that the task is I'm doing whatever with TV cards, but
Someone posted a project to Planet
Yeah.
Debian and Debian Develop a while back specifically about that, of go detect all the hardware in your system and find the appropriate set of
Yeah.
well,
packages.
It's called
Peter has done great work.
Isenkram or Isenkram or
That's the one, yeah.
that one.
Yeah, I don't know if it needs to be a task as such. Well, I know there's been depths for the previous things like Discover, and we just ran them, and if they say it needs this, we install the stuff, and we don't ask the user because we figure they have the hardware they want to use it, so we just do the best we can. I think that's why I don't think it's really a task, probably.
So I guess the very last thing then before we wrap up, who's driving this before we do Jesse? Because somebody does need to make sure that this actually happens.
The main reason that I'm unsure if I'm going to be able to work on the more tasks thing is because I want to make sure this happens. So, like I said, I'm going to try to send out mails to the teams during that process, and then
So does anybody volunteer to do the more tasks thing, the task selection thing? Because that's, this is the main way of making sure this happens, and we're not just having hot air in the room here. I don't see any obvious hands. I am sure as hell not volunteering. I've got too much to do already.
If we end up,
If nobody shows up, I may be interested to do it as but like I may be also very busy. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. So it would be lovely to have this. If anybody's listening to on video or is on IRC or whatever, please dive in. Talk to us on Debian Boot, and we'll go with this. We can't promise that we'll be able to help very much, but we can definitely help review things.
The stream is currently stuck, so what is the exact scope? I can relate to the IRC people. There were quite a lot of IRC people looking at the stream, but it's just down.
Oh.
So what's the exact scope of the task?
Oh, that's a hard question. The idea, though, is that it's a task. It's something that you're going to do with the computer. And so you could make it into a mail server or a file server.
No, I think
or a
one level
desktop.
zoom out. I think the scope of the task is, it would be
the scope
great
of the
if someone
forecast.
could make it possible,
Yeah.
when you're looking at a selection of tasks, for example, which desktop to install, to be able to say, no, I want something else, click on more, and then
So
see.
it's adding another
Okay.
DevConf question and coming up with some kind of metadata to say this is on the more screen or it's on the main screen. That's really all it is.
Should we set up a wiki so that we can think about what to put in more? Or so do you think it's the best media?
There are already several bug reports on tasksel about this, so I can just, going in one of them.
Pulling it together in a wiki page might actually help for some design ideas and stuff. Definitely. Go for it if you like. Well volunteered.
as a short-term thing for Jesse, for that matter, if we review the set of existing tasks in tasksel, the 10 that we currently prompt about, if it turns out there's 2 or 3 that don't make sense anymore, we could always have a default desktop, parenthetically GNOME or KDE or XFCE, and then a few others.
I'm not as happy with that because it comes back to wanting to have the default things in tasksel actually make sense to somebody who doesn't necessarily know that much about desktops, and so I'd rather not mention them there, but that is one way to do it. Okay, I think we're completely out of time, so I'm just going to wrap up. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Yep.